Hey Virgo, it's Rebecca or I should say, fellow Virgos. It's Rebecca with Being Human Tarot, and I'm here to give you your August 2018 reading. This month I'm changing it up a little bit from what I did last month, and I'm doing a 3-card spread because I felt like the 5-card spread started to get a little bit long-winded at times, and so I'm keeping it simple. So first position is what's important now. Second position is what to set aside for this month. And third position is an additional consideration for the month. Also, I'm pulling one card from Kim Krans's Animal Spirit deck, which, if you're kind of into tarot and oracle cards, you know Kim Krans as being the author of the Wild Unknown deck. She does a lot of like beautiful line drawings, and so I don't know, I find her illustrations a treat. Hopefully you will too. Okay, so to get into your first card for August, we have the 9 of Swords. Which is the card typically, I mean, you get the gist here as well, and I feel like I sometimes get in the habit of, when I'm using a deck that's different than the Smith Rider-Waite, to reference that deck, even though the whole point of using different decks is to kind of like bounce off like the imagery that you're getting from that deck, rather than like being like, oh, in the Smith Rider-Waite it looks like this, but both images are very similar, so I feel like referencing it doesn't take away from this card too much. But so like we have in this card, like the 9 swords about to pierce these like bound hands. In Smith Rider-Waite, it's a person sitting up in bed, kind of like holding their head, and they're like these, you know, like the same 9 swords, like metaphorically like piercing through. Frankly, it's luckily, not frankly, it's not super gory. So, because it is a metaphor, which we'll get to in a second about how it's not as bad as it seems. But in this deck, which is the 8 of Coins Tattoo Tarot, we have these bound hands with, if you can see, she actually put like the symbols of the zodiac on the fingers, and then on the wrists the symbol for Jupiter and Saturn, standing for mind over matter and matter over mind, which really is kind of a key message for this card, is that this card is rather self-torturous. It's about sort of like those sleepless nights in bed where you're just anxiety-ridden, and perhaps you're having cyclical thoughts that you can't break through. But it tends to be, as a lot of the Swords cards are, frankly, like it tends to be not as bad as it seems. As a 9, you're nearing completion of that suit, which kind of like walks you through the different stages, and so you're almost finished. The 10 is sort of like the then like done, like complete, and then like finality, moving on. But as a 9, it's like you're almost there, but maybe not quite. I mean, definitely not quite if you're agonizing over things like this. Swords are an air suit. They deal with the mind, thoughts, mental clarity. And so with this card in your position of importance for the month, it's really calling you to chill out, frankly. It's not to say that there aren't things going on that are stressing you out and that deserve some attention and some thought, like, but as a fellow Virgo, and I'm sorry because I do this for all the Virgo readings, I just can't help but like project a bit of like my own like neuroses and experiences, which I guess, you know, like to be fair, is a huge part of tarot on the whole, like regardless of who you're reading for. But so it's natural, and there may be something going on that like does make you very upset and like over analytical this month, but it's important now to recognize that while you want to be respectful of your feelings and the things that you're going through and not just dismiss any like intense like hardships, it's also, you know, like you need to remember that we are our own worst enemies at times, especially in our own minds. And so whatever it is that you're struggling with this month, that you're having a hard time overcoming, that you kind of can't stop thinking about, just keep that in mind. That and maybe even, I say this in a lot of readings for different situations, but I feel like that's really important to talk to other people, especially in like this kind of situation where you feel like the absolute worst, like everything is falling apart, like things are very dire. Sometimes you just need to talk to someone who doesn't have your own self-bias and can kind of like, if you're being self-critical, for example, about something, you're like, why did I do that? I'm the worst. That person hates me. I ruined everything. And then you talk to someone who has that outside perspective, and they're like, oh, that's not a big deal. Like, I can understand like why you're not thrilled about that, but I wouldn't worry about it. Like, person's probably not even thinking about it anymore. So it's something to keep in mind, you know. It's kind of like the main thing for the month. Be kind to yourself. Don't let yourself get too carried away and whatever might be a big stressor this month, because likely it's not as bad as you think it is. For your card of what to set aside now, you drew the Page of Wands. So the Page of Wands is fire energy, it's creativity. It's actually interesting. I've seen in more than one deck the Page of Wands represented by a fox. So I guess that's something to kind of focus on. We think of foxes, you know, and like common lore is kind of being these like spunky, like clever, bouncy little creatures who are going about their wily ways and with a lot of enthusiasm for life and being sort of playful, which also pages are known to be as, you know, in the court cards, like the younger energy, which I don't want to misconstrue as being immature energy. It's just, it's different because there are pros and cons of all stages of life, right? As we get older, we can be more jaded, and that doesn't necessarily serve us. Anyway, but in the position of what to set aside right now, it could be that, so with the what's important now of the Nine of Swords, so although you don't want to get carried away in whatever that particular stressor and worry is, the message is also not that whatever that situation isn't a big deal. I know that I said it's not as big of a deal as you think it is, and I stand by that, but it's kind of like conversely, it's not to just completely discard that and be like, oh, okay, not going to think about that because the message was that everything's fine and that's not a big deal, and like I was overanalyzing it, but there's no concern there. That's not true. there is something going on there that's worthy of attention. It's not worthy of, agonizing over to a point that isn't productive for sure. But as a set aside for now, like maybe don't kind of just completely like walk away from that and be like, okay, like things are fine, then I'm just going to like turn a blind eye to what that difficult situation is and like look at this rosy, like, what can I do? Like, I'm just gonna like go out and have fun and ignore what that situation is because it's unpleasant. There were different cards, but there's sort of a similar dynamic for Libra this month too. So just keep that in mind, that although you don't want to, beat yourself up for your challenge of the month, you also don't want to live in denial of what that is. You want to, respect it as real and deal with it as you need to, rather than kind of just putting it behind you and acting like it didn't happen, because it's not a good way to heal or move on from anything. And as your additional consideration for the month, you have the Two of Pentacles. Which is sort of like a great complementary card to the first two cards, because like, right, first you have focus on not like being completely upset with yourself and agonizing over whatever particular struggle it is that you're going through this month. And then also don't, as a result of that advice, or just how uncomfortable that situation is, don't just like completely block it out and move on as if it doesn't exist and ignore it. And then we have the Two of Pentacles, which is, like Virgo, Pentacles are an earth sign. And it's all about balance, right? There's this like great muscular woman balancing her two pentacles. She's taking care of stuff. It can be a juggling act. So it's recognizing that there's a challenge in these two like urges that we can find in ourselves. The one to look at sort of the worst of ourselves, or like think the worst of ourselves, and then the other to kind of like live in denial about like what's going on and not recognize and process and heal from the struggles that we do have. And so then it's like additional consideration, balance between both of those, which I feel like I've kind of already covered by talking about the nuance in both of them, but it's just kind of like a good cap off to try your best, like in challenging times, to ground yourself in the different things that you have going on in your life, and like make the best of it. And like, I mean, that's rather general advice, and we're all kind of doing the best that we can in any given moment. I mean, or we think we're doing the best. Like, I don't think we would actively not do our best and then just be like kind of half hurting this. But anyway, for your Kim Krans Animal Spirit card, I'm smiling because you drew the hyena. It's great artwork, if that'll focus well. I'm smiling because like a couple days ago, I made a joke about being like a hyena, and I don't know, it just seems like kind of serendipitous. Like, how often does a hyena come up in your conversation in like the last 6 months, let's say? So it just feels like kind of funny, also because I'm a Virgo, but yeah. So as your animal spirit message, and also because of everything that's going on, it's like this hard stuff that is going on this month. It's kind of reminding you that to kind of keep your spirits up. Actually, foxes and hyenas are not so different. They both have like kind of like a similar size and stature and a playfulness. Admittedly, like the hyena's playfulness is more of like a sociopathic carnivorous playfulness. But you know, to each their own. Hyenas gotta be hyenas. So anyway, in your reading, I find that like it's to kind of like keep your playfulness around still. I know like it seems a bit contradictory from the set aside for now the foxiness, but again, it's all a balancing act. I know I'm getting a little repetitive, but just trying to make sure that I'm tying everything together well for the reading. Also, if you look at the moon in this card, it's like a very split. There's half the shadow and then half the lit moon, which is just, I feel like, another great sign of balance, like to complement the Two of Pentacles. And so that's a huge theme for this month of trying to find that point in your, in yourself where you're taking an approach that's well metered and not at one excess of like self-hate, not at the other excess of complete denial because it's too hard to process. And then kind of like remembering that through it, like it's okay to laugh at yourself during it. It's okay to, tear up a lion carcass or whatever you need to do with your hyena energy. Sorry, it's like not funny joke at all. But that's your reading for this month, Virgo. If you liked it, please do give it a thumbs up. And I would love it if you also wanted to subscribe. And then if you hit the bell icon next to subscribe, then you'll get automatically notified as soon as I upload the suite of videos for all the signs, which I do before the first of every month so that you get a little bit of time with them for the month ahead. That's it for August. I will pause this and pin down so that you can look at the full reading and just see it laid out visually. That's it. Bye, Virgo. So here you can see the full spread. The Knight of Swords, Page of Wands, Two of Pentacles, and that feisty hyena. Thanks for tuning in. See you next month.